Who hurt my Omega? The Alpha King's voice cut through the royal hall, and every conversation stopped. Emily Carter had barely crossed the marble floor when her strength gave way. Adrian Blackwood caught her before she fell, one arm steady beneath her shoulders as her pale face rested against his chest. For a moment, the entire court seemed frozen beneath the crystal chandeliers. Emily's breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled against the fabric of her coat, and her clear blue eyes struggled to remain open. Adrian looked down at her, and the calm expression he carried before hundreds of nobles disappeared. He was the Alpha King, a man accustomed to decisions, responsibility, and absolute attention from everyone around him. Yet now, none of that mattered. The only thing he could see was Emily. "Emily," he said quietly. "Look at me." Her eyes opened. She recognized him, and something like relief passed across her face before fear returned. "I am fine," she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You are not fine." He lowered her carefully into a nearby chair, then turned toward the silent court. No one dared interrupt him. The great hall was filled with polished stone, towering windows, and winter light, but the atmosphere had become painfully still. Emily had always been easy to overlook. She was a quiet Omega who worked within the palace, someone who kept her head down and completed every task placed before her. She never demanded attention. She never asked powerful people for favors. Yet Adrian remembered seeing her help others when no one was watching. He remembered the young palace worker she had comforted. He remembered hearing that she had carried supplies through a snowstorm for an elderly groundskeeper. Emily had never seemed interested in recognition. Now she sat before him looking as though she had spent days carrying a burden far too heavy for one person. Adrian crouched in front of her. "Tell me what happened." Emily looked toward the council chamber doors. Her fingers tightened around her sleeve. "Please." Her voice broke. "Do not ask." Adrian stared at her. The words were simple, but they carried a fear that unsettled him more than any accusation ever could. "Who are you afraid of?" Emily shook her head. "It does not matter anymore. It matters to me." She looked at him again, and tears gathered in her eyes without falling. "If you ask questions, people will know I told you." Adrian remained silent. Then he noticed something else. Emily was not only afraid for herself. She kept glancing toward the people gathered behind him, as though she were protecting someone else by refusing to speak. That realization changed everything. Adrian rose slowly and looked across the hall. "Everyone leaves." The command was quiet. It did not need to be repeated. The nobles began moving toward the doors, whispering among themselves. Emily watched them disappear. When the hall was finally empty, Adrian returned to her side. "Now there is no audience," he said. "You can tell me the truth." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked exhausted. "I did not come here to ask you for protection." Adrian waited. "Then why did you come?" Her answer was almost too quiet to hear. "Because I did not know where else to go." And for the first time, Adrian understood that whatever had brought Emily to his throne had already pushed her far beyond the point of asking for help. 3 days earlier, Emily Carter had been almost invisible inside Blackwood Palace. She moved quietly through its long marble corridors, carrying records, folded linens, and whatever small responsibilities were placed in her hands. At 26, Emily had learned that being overlooked could feel safer than being noticed. The palace belonged to another world, one of polished stone, crystal chandeliers, formal dinners, and people who spoke as though their decisions could shape the lives of everyone below them. Emily was an Omega without a powerful family, an important title, or anyone waiting behind her to defend her. Yet she had something the palace could not easily measure. She noticed people. When an elderly groundskeeper struggled with a box of supplies during a heavy winter storm, Emily quietly helped him carry it across the courtyard. When a young kitchen assistant received difficult news from home, Emily sat beside her during lunch. And stayed until she no longer looked alone. She never asked for recognition. She simply believed that if someone needed help, another person should stop and help. Adrian Blackwood had seen her before, though Emily did not know it. The Alpha King rarely walked through the servants' corridors, but on the few occasions he had noticed the same quiet woman moving through the palace with her eyes lowered and her attention everywhere. He had never spoken to her. That changed 3 days before she collapsed in the Great Hall. Emily was delivering a stack of household records to the Eastern Council chamber when she heard 2 officials speaking behind a partially closed door. Their voices were low, but the corridor carried every word. They were discussing an accounting error involving palace supplies, and someone named Daniel was about to be held responsible. Emily knew Daniel. He was 19, hard-working, and nervous around senior officials. She stopped outside the door and looked down at the documents in her hands. She should have kept walking. Instead, she remembered something Daniel had once told her. He had said that he was always afraid of making mistakes because people with power never listened when he tried to explain himself. Emily took a slow breath and entered the chamber. The officials turned toward her with surprise. "Can we help you?" one asked. Emily held the records against her chest. "I believe there is a mistake in the report." The official frowned. "You believe?" Emily swallowed. "The shipment arrived on Tuesday, not Thursday. I recorded it when it came in." Another official exchanged a glance with his colleague. "You are an Omega assigned to palace service. This is a council matter." Emily felt the weight of those words, but she did not step back. "I understand. But the record is still incorrect." Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. Adrian entered with 2 advisors behind him. The room immediately fell silent. His gaze moved from the officials to Emily. "What is happening?" One official quickly answered, "A minor disagreement over a supply report, Your Majesty." Adrian looked at Emily. "Is that true?" Emily hesitated. Then she handed him the document. "No, Your Majesty. Someone is about to be blamed for a mistake they did not make." Adrian studied the page, then looked at the supporting record. He asked Emily 3 careful questions. She answered every one. When she finished, Adrian turned toward the council. "Correct the record," he said. "And speak with Daniel before making any decision about responsibility." Emily lowered her head. "Yes, Your Majesty." She turned toward the door. "Emily." She stopped. Adrian's voice softened. "Thank you for speaking when it would have been easier to remain silent." She looked back at him, surprised. Then she quietly left the chamber. Adrian watched her disappear down the corridor, unaware that the quiet Omega had just stepped into a mystery that would soon change both their lives. The next morning, Emily returned to the Eastern Archives with a strange feeling she could not explain. The palace looked unchanged, but the memory of Adrian thanking her remained in her mind. She had never expected the Alpha King to notice her, much less listen to her. Still, she tried to put the moment aside and focus on her work. The archive room was quiet, filled with tall wooden shelves, old ledgers, and narrow windows covered with a thin layer of winter frost. Emily placed her records on the desk and began sorting them by date. Then she noticed something unusual. One drawer that she had closed the previous evening was slightly open. Emily stopped. She was certain she had secured it before leaving. She approached slowly and pulled the drawer open. Several old financial records were missing. Her heart began to beat faster. These were not ordinary household papers. They contained historical information about royal community programs and the funds assigned to them. Emily checked the neighboring drawers. Everything else appeared untouched. Then she heard footsteps in the corridor. She closed the drawer and turned around as Marcus Vale entered the room. Marcus was a senior royal official in his early 40s, always dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, with a calm smile that rarely revealed what he was thinking. "Good morning, Emily," he said. "You are here early." "I usually am." Marcus glanced toward the archive cabinets. "You have been spending quite a lot of time with financial records lately." Emily kept her expression neutral. "It is part of my work." Marcus smiled. "Of course. Still, you should be careful about becoming involved in matters above your position." Emily looked directly at him. "I only organize records." "That is what I mean." His tone remained polite. "Sometimes people misunderstand what they discover." He walked toward the door, then paused. "The Alpha King seems interested in your observations." Emily said nothing. Marcus gave a small nod and left. Once he was gone, Emily waited several seconds before opening the drawer again. Her hands were slightly unsteady. She examined the remaining papers and noticed that one page had been folded differently from the others. She opened it carefully. A handwritten note appeared in the margin. The handwriting belonged to a former palace records clerk. The message was brief: "Check the royal household account before the Winter Council." Emily read it twice. Then she remembered Adrian's warning. "Do not investigate anything alone." She folded the page and placed it inside her notebook. She needed to tell him. As she left the archive, she found Adrian waiting near the end of the corridor. He stood beside a tall window overlooking the winter garden, dressed in his formal black suit, his expression serious. "You found something," he said. Emily looked surprised. "How did you know?" "You are carrying yourself differently." She almost smiled. "Someone searched the archives." Adrian's expression changed. "What was missing?" "Financial records." She handed him the folded note. Adrian read it carefully. "Who else knows about these records?" Emily hesitated. "Marcus Vale asked me about them this morning." Adrian looked toward the empty corridor. "Did he say anything unusual?" "He warned me that attention could be dangerous for someone in my position." Adrian was silent for a moment. "That was not a warning." Emily looked at him. "What was it?" "A reminder that he knows you are looking." The words settled heavily between them. Adrian opened the note again. "From now on, you do not investigate alone." Emily nodded. "I understand." "Good." He looked at her. "Because whatever is happening inside my administration has already reached you." Emily lowered her eyes. "I never wanted this." Adrian's voice softened. "Neither did I." For a moment, the palace seemed unusually quiet. Then Adrian looked toward the library. "Come with me. There is something else I need you to see." Emily followed him, unaware that the records she had uncovered were only the beginning, and that the person watching her had already realized she was much closer to the truth than anyone expected. Adrian led Emily into the private royal library, closing the heavy wooden doors behind them. The room was warmer than the archives, filled with tall bookshelves, polished furniture, and the soft glow of a fireplace. On the center table lay several financial records arranged in neat stacks. Emily recognized some immediately. "These are household accounts," she said. Adrian nodded. "They cover the last 18 months. Emily pulled out a chair and began examining them. She moved carefully, comparing dates and figures without rushing. Adrian watched from across the table, noticing how quickly she found details that others had overlooked. After several minutes, Emily stopped at one page. "This number is different." Adrian walked closer. "Different how?" She placed two documents side by side. "This transfer appears in the current record, but the original authorization has a different amount." Adrian studied the pages. "Could it be a clerical correction?" "It could," Emily said. "But there are too many differences." She continued checking the records. Another discrepancy appeared. Then another. Small amounts had been moved between accounts, each change carefully hidden among ordinary expenses. None looked important by itself. Together, they formed a pattern. Adrian remained silent as Emily traced the entries with her finger. Someone has been changing the records after they were approved. He looked at her. Can you prove that? Emily nodded toward a date. The approval number here was used 3 months earlier. Adrian checked the original archived copy. She was right. The same authorization number appeared on 2 different documents. His expression became more serious. Who has access to these records? Emily thought for a moment. The accounting office, senior council staff, and anyone authorized to use the Royal Archives. Marcus Vale? Yes. Adrian looked toward the tall windows. Snow was falling gently over the palace gardens. You said he asked about your work. Emily nodded. He wanted to know why I had been near the Eastern Archives. Adrian returned to the table. Then we have a reason to watch him, but not enough evidence to accuse him. Emily appreciated the distinction. He was not rushing toward a conclusion simply because Marcus seemed suspicious. What do we do now? She asked. Adrian considered the documents. We continue quietly. Emily looked at him. You trust me with this? He answered without hesitation. You have given me no reason not to. The words caught her off guard. She had expected suspicion, especially from someone with his position. Instead, Adrian had given her something she had rarely received inside the palace. Trust. Emily looked back at the records. There is another problem. Adrian waited. She pointed to a series of community accounts. These programs received less funding every few months, but the public reports show the original amounts. Adrian's expression changed. So someone is hiding the missing money. Or hiding where it went. Emily paused. There may be another record. Adrian raised his eyes. Where? The royal household account. The words from the old handwritten note suddenly seemed more important. Adrian walked to a locked cabinet near the fireplace and removed a key. Then we check it. Emily followed him to the cabinet. Before he opened it, footsteps sounded beyond the library doors. Both of them stopped. The footsteps passed without stopping. Adrian waited several seconds before turning the key. Inside were older financial ledgers, carefully preserved beneath a layer of protective cloth. Emily reached for the first volume and opened it. A familiar name appeared on the first page of the oldest transfer. Marcus Vale. She looked at Adrian. He did not speak. Neither did she. Somewhere beyond the library walls, the palace continued with its ordinary morning routine. But inside the quiet room, they had just found the first connection strong enough to turn suspicion into a real investigation. By the following morning, Emily could not shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The palace looked peaceful as sunlight spread across the marble corridors, but every quiet conversation seemed to stop when she approached. She tried to focus on her duties, yet the discovery in the royal household account remained in her thoughts. Marcus Vale's name had appeared beside the oldest suspicious transfer, and Adrian had told her they needed more evidence before making any accusation. Emily respected that. She did not want rumors. She wanted the truth. After breakfast, she returned to the Eastern Archives and began checking older records. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of turning pages. Then she noticed something unusual. A drawer that she had locked the previous evening was open. Emily stopped beside it. She remembered closing it herself. Inside, several documents had been moved. Nothing appeared damaged, but the records were no longer arranged in their original order. Someone had been searching through them. Emily carefully checked the remaining files and found that one page was missing from the oldest household account. Before she could think further, footsteps approached. Marcus appeared in the doorway with the same polite expression he always wore. "Good morning, Emily." She turned toward him. "Good morning." Marcus glanced at the open drawer. "You seem busy." "I am reviewing older records." He smiled. "Still interested in financial matters?" Emily kept her voice calm. "I am only doing my work." Marcus stepped farther into the room but remained near the doorway. "You should be careful. People sometimes mistake curiosity for ambition." Emily looked directly at him. "I have no ambition beyond doing my job correctly." Marcus gave a quiet smile. "That may be wise." His eyes moved toward the documents in her hands. "The Alpha King seems to have taken an unusual interest in your work." Emily said nothing. Marcus nodded once and left. The moment he disappeared, Emily closed the drawer and hurried toward the private library. Adrian was already there, reviewing reports at his desk. He looked up when she entered. "What happened?" Emily told him about the missing page and Marcus's visit. Adrian listened without interrupting. "Did he threaten you?" "No." She paused. "But he wanted me to know that he was aware of your interest in the records." Adrian stood and walked toward the window. "Then he knows we are investigating." Emily looked uneasy. "Should we stop?" Adrian turned toward her. "Do you want to?" She thought about Daniel, the missing funds, and the people who depended on the community programs. "No." Adrian nodded. "Then we continue." He returned to the desk and opened another file. "But from now on, you will not investigate alone." Emily looked at him. "I can be careful." "I know." His expression softened. "That is not what concerns me." She waited. "You have been carrying responsibilities that were never yours to carry." Emily lowered her eyes. "Someone has to." Adrian was silent for a moment. "Not always you." The words touched something she had spent years ignoring. She had become so accustomed to solving problems quietly that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone stand beside her. Adrian placed a new document on the desk. It was a list of community programs affected by the missing funds. Emily studied it and immediately recognized a pattern. The amounts were not random. Each transfer occurred shortly before a major royal event, when the palace administration was busiest. Someone had chosen those dates because they knew the records would receive less attention. Emily looked up. Whoever did this knew the royal schedule. Adrian's expression became serious. Only a small group of people would have access to that information. Emily pointed to one of the documents. "Then we should compare the transfers with the travel records." Adrian nodded. They worked side by side for nearly 2 hours. When they finished, Emily noticed the same authorization number appearing again and again. "This number belongs to the Senior Administration Office." Adrian looked at the page. "That office is managed by Marcus Vale." Emily's heart sank. The evidence was no longer a collection of strange coincidences. It was beginning to form a pattern. Adrian closed the file carefully. "We still need proof." Emily nodded. Then a sealed notice arrived at the library door. Adrian opened it, read the first few lines, and went completely still. He handed the document to Emily. Her eyes moved across the page, and her face lost its color. It was an official order removing her from palace service while an investigation into the missing funds was conducted. At the bottom was Marcus Vale's signature. Emily looked at Adrian. "He is blaming me." Adrian took the notice from her hands. His voice remained calm. "No, Emily. He is trying to make everyone believe that you are responsible." The room fell silent. Emily finally understood why Marcus had been watching her. She was not simply a witness. She was the one person who could connect the missing records to the truth. The official notice remained on the library table between them, its seal still visible beneath the soft afternoon light. Emily stared at the page, trying to understand how quickly everything had changed. That morning she had been searching for missing records. Now the palace administration had formally placed her under investigation. Adrian read the notice again, then folded it with deliberate care. "You are not leaving the palace," he said. Emily looked at him. "The order says I am suspended." The order was issued by Marcus Vale. His voice remained calm. "He does not have final authority over your status." Emily lowered her eyes. "But if the council believes it, they may not listen to me." Adrian stepped away from the desk. "Then we will give them something they cannot ignore." He summoned independent auditors from outside the royal administration and asked them to review the financial records without interference from the council. Emily remained in the library while they worked, comparing archived documents with newer copies. For several hours, the room was filled with the quiet sound of turning pages and careful notes. At first, nothing seemed conclusive. Then one auditor noticed that several authorization numbers had been reused on different dates. Emily immediately recognized them. Those numbers belonged to older approval forms. The auditor looked at her. "How do you know?" "I filed some of them myself." Adrian turned toward her. "Show us." Emily carefully explained how the original records had been organized and why the repeated numbers could not be accidental. The auditors compared the documents again. The pattern became clearer. Someone had copied legitimate authorization numbers and attached them to altered financial records. Adrian looked at Emily. "You were right." She shook her head. "We still do not know who benefited." They continued searching. The missing funds had come from several community programs, but the money had not simply disappeared. It had been transferred through a charitable account connected to the royal household. Emily studied the account name. Blackwood Foundation for Community Relief. Adrian became still. "That foundation was created by my mother." Emily looked at the documents again. "Then someone used your family's foundation to make the transfers appear legitimate." One auditor nodded. "That is what the records suggest." Adrian looked toward the window, his expression unusually distant. Emily could see that the discovery had affected him personally. The foundation had been created to help families throughout the kingdom, and now its name had been used to hide financial changes. "Adrian," Emily said quietly. He looked at her. "We need to find the original authorization." He nodded. They searched through older records until Emily found a document dated 18 months earlier. At the bottom was a familiar signature. Jonathan Reed, Adrian's chief advisor. Emily looked at the page. "This is his signature." Adrian took the document and studied it. For several seconds, he said nothing. "Jonathan has managed royal administration for 12 years, he finally said. He has had access to these records for most of that time." Emily watched him carefully. "Do you think he did it?" Adrian shook his head. "I do not know." That answer surprised her. She had expected certainty from a king. Instead, Adrian was willing to admit that he did not have enough evidence. "Then we keep looking," Emily said. Adrian looked at her with quiet respect. "Yes. We keep looking." That evening, the auditors confirmed that Jonathan had approved the earliest transfer, but the money had not entered any account connected to him. The trail ended somewhere else. Adrian closed the file and looked at Emily. "You should rest." She almost smiled. "You too." For the first time, Adrian did not argue. Emily gathered her notebook, but before she reached the door, Adrian spoke. "Emily." She turned. "Whatever happens next, you are not facing it alone." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. Outside the library, the palace remained quiet beneath the winter sky. Inside, the investigation had taken a new direction. Marcus had tried to make Emily the center of the accusation, but the records were beginning to tell a different story. And somewhere inside the royal administration, someone had trusted a false explanation long enough to help hide the truth. The next morning, Adrian asked Emily to meet him in the private library before the council session began. The winter sky outside was pale and quiet, and a thin layer of snow covered the palace gardens. Emily entered carrying her notebook, expecting another review of the financial records. Instead, Adrian placed a sealed envelope on the table. "This arrived before sunrise," he said. Emily opened it carefully. Inside was an official council notice stating that her suspension had been extended and that the investigation into the missing funds would continue under the administration office. At the bottom was Marcus Vale's signature. Emily looked up. "He is trying to keep control of the investigation." Adrian nodded. "And he wants the council to believe that the evidence points toward you." Emily sat down slowly. "What can we do?" Adrian opened a second folder. "We stopped defending you with explanations and let the original records speak." The independent auditors had spent the night comparing archived documents with current copies. They had discovered that several approval numbers had been reused, but the trail still stopped before reaching the final destination of the funds. Emily studied the pages carefully. Then she noticed something she had seen before. "These dates," she said. "They match the king's travel schedule." Adrian looked at her. "Explain." Emily pointed to the transfers. "Every major change happened shortly before you left the capital. During those periods, the palace administration was handling additional reports, invitations, security arrangements, and travel documents. Whoever changed the records knew when everyone would be distracted." Adrian became thoughtful. "Who has access to my travel schedule?" Emily looked at the list of senior officials. "Marcus does." Adrian nodded. "So do several others." They compared the schedule with the financial records again. A second pattern appeared. The transfers were approved shortly before major royal events, then hidden inside routine household expenses. Emily traced one authorization number across 3 documents. This was not random. Adrian looked at her. "No." She continued. "Someone planned around your schedule." Before they could continue, a council messenger entered the library and announced that Marcus Vale had requested an immediate hearing regarding Emily's suspension. Adrian closed the folder. "Tell the council I will attend." The messenger bowed and left. Emily stood. "He wants to put me on trial before we are ready." Adrian looked directly at her. "He wants to control the story before the evidence is complete." Emily took a slow breath. "Then we need the original transfer." Adrian nodded. They returned to the oldest household ledgers and searched through 18 months of records. Near the end of the second volume, Emily found another authorization number. It matched the first suspicious transfer. Beneath it was a signature. Jonathan Reed. Adrian stared at the page. Jonathan had served as his chief advisor for 12 years. He had been trusted with the royal administration, financial schedules, and private council information. "There is no way to know whether he created the transfer," Adrian said. Emily looked at the document. "But he approved it." Adrian nodded. "Yes." The council hearing began less than an hour later. Marcus stood before the council with a prepared statement accusing Emily of mishandling financial records. Emily remained beside Adrian, quiet but composed. When Marcus finished, Adrian placed the original documents on the table. "You forgot one thing," he said. Marcus looked at him. "What is that, Your Majesty?" Adrian turned toward the council. "The original records." The room became silent as the auditors explained the duplicated authorization numbers and altered entries. Marcus attempted to explain that the records could have been changed by anyone with access, but Emily calmly pointed out that the dates corresponded with restricted administrative schedules. Several council members exchanged uneasy looks. Then Adrian placed the document bearing Jonathan Reed's signature in front of them. This is where the trail begins. Marcus's expression changed for the first time. Emily noticed it immediately. He was not surprised by Jonathan's name. He was afraid of it. Adrian saw the same reaction. The Alpha King closed the folder. Now we are asking a different question. He looked across the council chamber. Who convinced my chief advisor to approve these transfers? No one answered. And in that silence, Emily realized Marcus had never been the final answer. He had only been the first door they had opened. The council chamber remained silent after Adrian asked who had convinced his chief advisor to approve the transfers. Jonathan Reed was not present, and that absence suddenly seemed more important than anyone had realized. Adrian closed the folder and turned toward the senior council members. Bring Jonathan here, he said. Within minutes, the chief advisor entered the chamber, his expression controlled but concerned. He looked at Adrian, then at the documents spread across the table. Your Majesty, I was told this meeting concerned Emily Carter. Adrian gestured toward the records. It concerns all of us now. Jonathan approached the table and examined the papers. When he saw the oldest authorization, his face changed. I remember this transfer. Emily watched him carefully. You approved it? Jonathan nodded slowly. Yes. But I did not understand what it was being used for. Marcus Vale immediately stepped forward. That is impossible. The authorization was reviewed through the proper channels. Adrian raised one hand, and Marcus fell silent. Let him speak. Jonathan took a breath. 18 months ago, I received a report stating that several community programs required temporary restructuring. The report claimed that funds would be moved through the Blackwood Foundation and returned after the winter allocation cycle. Emily looked at the documents. Who gave you that report? Jonathan hesitated. Marcus. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. Marcus shook his head. I provided administrative information, not financial instructions. Jonathan looked at him. You provided the report and told me it had already been reviewed. Adrian's expression remained calm. Did you verify it? Jonathan lowered his eyes. No. The admission settled over the chamber with quiet weight. Emily looked at the records again. The mystery was beginning to make sense. Marcus had not needed to control every account himself. He only needed trusted people to believe the information he provided. Jonathan had acted on that information, believing he was helping maintain the community programs. The altered records had then made the transfers appear legitimate. Adrian looked toward Emily. What do you see? Emily studied the dates once more. The original community allocations were never fully restored. Jonathan looked surprised. I was told they had been. Emily pointed to the later reports. Someone changed the final reports after your approval. Adrian turned to the auditors. Can you confirm that? One auditor nodded. Yes. The original versions show different figures. Adrian looked at Jonathan. Then you were deceived too. Jonathan remained silent for a moment. I should have checked the records myself. Adrian's voice softened. Yes. You should have. There was disappointment in his words, but not cruelty. He understood that trust without verification could create consequences even when intentions were good. Then Adrian turned toward Marcus. And you knew about the altered reports. Marcus tried to answer, but the evidence was already arranged before him. The auditors had found his authorization requests, his correspondence, and the dates of his administrative access. Emily had noticed the pattern that everyone else had missed. Adrian finally looked at the council. Emily Carter will not carry responsibility for decisions she did not make. He took the suspension notice from the table and tore it in half, then placed the pieces aside. Her suspension is ended. Emily looked at him, almost unable to believe the words. Adrian continued, but this investigation has shown something more important. Our system failed because people were judged by their position instead of the evidence they presented. He looked directly at Emily. She spoke when it would have been easier to remain silent. We should have listened sooner. Emily lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by the recognition she had never expected. Adrian stepped away from the table. The council will review every affected community account, and no employee will be dismissed simply because their rank makes them an easy target. The room remained quiet. For Emily, the greatest change was not the end of the accusation. It was the realization that the Alpha King had finally understood what she had been trying to show him from the beginning. People who were rarely heard still carried truths worth hearing. And when Adrian looked at her across the chamber, there was no longer distance between ruler and servant. There was trust. By late afternoon, the council chamber had finally emptied, leaving Emily standing alone beside the long wooden table where her name had been cleared. For the first time in days, she could breathe without wondering what accusation would come next. The suspension notice was gone. The financial records had been secured. Marcus Vale had been removed from the investigation, and the council had agreed to review every affected community account. Yet Emily did not feel victorious. She felt tired. The kind of tiredness that settled deep inside after too many nights of worry and too many hours spent pretending everything was fine. Adrian remained near the council doors, speaking quietly with the independent auditors. When he noticed Emily preparing to leave, he stepped toward her. You should rest. Emily gave him a faint smile. You have said that before. And you have ignored me before. She almost laughed. That is true. Adrian's expression softened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them had changed. He was still the Alpha King, and she was still an Omega who had once been almost invisible within his palace, but the old imbalance no longer felt like a wall. Adrian looked toward the doors. You are free to leave the palace tonight if that is what you want. Emily nodded. I know. No one will stop you. She looked at him. Thank you. Adrian hesitated before asking, do you know what you want? Emily looked down at her hands. She had spent so long thinking about what other people needed that the question almost felt unfamiliar. I think I need some time to figure that out. Adrian nodded. Then take it. Emily left the council chamber alone. She walked slowly through the marble corridor, passing the tall windows where evening light stretched across the floor. The palace seemed quieter than usual. Every step reminded her of the past few days, the records, the accusations, the fear, and the strange trust that had grown between her and the Alpha King. She reached the great hall and stopped near the center of the marble floor. For the first time since everything began, there was nothing left to solve. No document to examine. No accusation to answer. No person to convince. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Then the exhaustion she had been carrying finally caught up with her. Her knees weakened. She reached for the edge of a nearby table, but her hand missed. Before she could fall, strong arms caught her carefully and steadied her. Adrian had followed at a distance, concerned that she might try to leave without resting. Emily. His voice was low and worried. She opened her eyes and saw him above her. The entire hall seemed to disappear around them. Adrian looked at her pale face, then toward the empty corridors. His calm expression gave way to unmistakable concern. Who hurt my Omega? Emily tried to answer, but the words would not come. She rested against him for a moment, too exhausted to pretend anymore. Adrian gently helped her into a nearby chair. Look at me, he said. Emily slowly raised her eyes. There was no fear in them now. Only exhaustion and relief. I am all right, she whispered. Adrian shook his head. You do not have to be strong every moment. Emily looked at him, and for the first time, she believed him. She had spent years thinking that needing help meant weakness. Adrian had shown her something different. Protection did not mean deciding her future. Trust did not mean giving up her freedom. And staying did not mean belonging to someone. It meant choosing where she wanted to be. Emily reached for his hand, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted him to know she was no longer alone. Adrian looked down at their hands and then back at her. "Are you sure?" he asked. Emily gave him a small, tired smile. "For the first time, I am." Outside, the last light of winter settled over the palace gardens. Inside, the Alpha King stood beside the Omega who had once been invisible to his court, and he finally understood that protecting someone was not about holding them close. It was about making sure they were free enough to choose to stay.